You know, when I first started board gaming as a true hobbyist, I kept coming across the phrase, grail game. With a general assumption of that phrase, I was off in search of what I thought would be my grail game. You see, at that time I was a gamer with wild drives towards whatever game I thought would tickle my fancy. I scourged the web looking for my particular taste, my odyssey, my muse. Sure, I had found games that met the approval of my group, but I was still in search of that ever-elusive grail game. Well, after about a year of looking on Board Game Geek, I stumbled across a game that piqued my interest greatly, and dare I say, could prove to be my grail game. If only I could afford it, or find it. Well, I'm happy to say that after a few years of desperately wanting it, it's finally come to rest with me. So today, on Coffee and Board Games, we're going to take a look at my grail game, Antiquity. For most people, this game is a complete unknown, and for many, it's not even something that's remotely interesting. For some, it is a game that might arouse your curiosity. But for a few people, it is the creme de la creme, a perfect marriage of game design and alluring mechanics. I tend to be in that latter category. At the time of filming this, the game is currently out of print. But don't let that discourage you. If you can find it, your patience will be rewarded. Antiquity was first published in 2004 by Splotter Games, with subsequent printings in 2006 and 2011-12 season. Designed by the famous team Joris and Jerome, the foundation of the Splotter group. The game plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 3 hours to play, give or take an hour depending on your group. So, let's see what comes inside the box. Inside you will find a rulebook written in both German and English. As far as rulebooks go, this is very clear and concise. Splotter's signature is deep, complex strategic games while providing a succinct rulebook. Very easy to understand. Player aids. A bit on the flimsy side, but I have no qualms about it. I feel like they're beautiful, and I think they add a true aesthetic element to the theme. Inside is a well-organized breakdown of almost every game element, including phases, including your initial city, a detailed list of what every building in the game does, including the size and the cost. You also have a detailed list of the saints, which allow for victory conditions. You have a breakdown of your goods, resources, what type they are, and where to find them, as well as your housing, the cost for adding new workers, your harvest box, and how to increase the resources. These are the main board tiles, which are double-sided. Only some of them will be used in every game, which means variability is always a factor in gameplay. The amount of boards used depends on how many players are in the game. A good rule of thumb is 2 boards for every player. Extra city tiles for when one city is not enough. Buildings, and more buildings, more buildings, and more buildings. The famine track. As you can see, there's 2 sets, just in case you would like to play 2 two-player games at one time. Resources, and other chits that are quite small. This container houses the resources. Which are right here. The grass tiles, the pollution tokens, and the explorer tokens, as well as the famine track. I highly recommend getting a container to house all of these items. Graves, for when your people die, which will happen more often than you think. And of course, the player's items. Cities, inns, houses, and workers. The object of Antiquity is to build a cathedral, dedicate it to a saint, and meet the victory conditions correlated with said saint. Sounds easy enough, right? Well, the devil is in the details. Now here is a simple breakdown of what the buildings do. For example, we have the cathedral, a basic building. Everyone needs to build it in order to win the game. Once you build your cathedral, you decide which saint it's dedicated to, and you receive your victory conditions as well as a bonus depending on which saint you get. The harbor. Building this allows you to gain access to water that is next to your city or inns, as well as the coastal region around it. This is very important if you want to extend your zone of control. The brewery allows you to build inns. It is an unmanned building, meaning once you build it, you do not need a worker in here. The granary. Once you build it, it reduces your famine level by 3. It's a very good building to have at the beginning of the game. It is unmanned, meaning once you build it, you do not have to put a worker in it. It's very useful and it's very cheap. The Explorer. This allows you to explore the Explorer tokens on the board. Without an Explorer building and without it being manned, you will not gain access to it. And if you happen to build where an Explorer token is, it will be lost forever. So this is a great way to get seeds for your resources. We have the market, and what the market does is allow you to trade resources with another player or with the game. This is very good to have if you run out of a particular resource and have a surplus of another. Trading with the game is a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 of any resource for 1 of any other type. With other players, you decide with them. You have to have it manned in order to trade. The hospital, which allows you to remove 5 graves at the beginning of your turn. It is manned. Stables, which increase your zone of control by 1. Now this is very, very useful if you want to get rid of pollution or get more resources. It's a difficult one to get, but it is definitely worth it. Forced labor. Having a man in this building allows you to gather 3 resources instead of the 1 from each producer. The catch is you have to discard 1 of those resources. So if you have a woodcutter out in the forest, you get to harvest 3 of them. 1 of them is discarded to go into your supply. If you happen to have 2 resources out there and use this, then only 1 of them you receive. It's tricky, but it can be useful in a pinch. The dump. A very important building to have. It prevents pollution, and other players cannot pollute in your zone of control. Towards the end of the game, this is a very valuable building to have manned at all times. Always man the dump. That's my motto. The fountain. It prevents pollution, and it lowers the famine level only once. So, you prevent pollution in your zone of control, but it also lowers the famine, not just for you, but for every player. The most important building in the game is, of course, the cart. The cart allows you to place workers out in the field. Workers out in the field are what will bring you resources. Having a cart man can also allow you to build an extra city, to build inns, to plant seeds given to you by your biology building, and so on. So manning a cart is what brings all the love to your city. Throughout the game, you will probably get more than one cart. Typically, in the games that I play, players will have 3 or 4 carts. And lastly, I would like to take a look at some special buildings in the game. We have the alchemy, philosophy, theology, and biology. The alchemy building is very useful because it allows you to clean 1 hex of pollution and the adjacent hexes. So having this building manned, you are allowed to clean up pollution in your city. The philosophy building allows you to ignore the D letter on certain buildings. For example, building a city or houses. The D means different. So some houses require 3D food, which means 3 different food. Having a man in this building, you get to ignore that, and you can build that house with 3 of the same food if you choose to. The biology building allows you to build a farm for free, providing a seed for you. But in order to use it, you will need a man here, and one in the cart as well. The man here will stay here to get the seed, and the one in the cart will be your producer. The last one in this group is the theology building. This allows you to raise or destroy your own cathedral, and you can change the saint that you are respecting. Except for Santa Maria, which is a special situation. Now, these buildings take up a lot of space. If you were to build all of them in your initial city, you would run out of space very quickly. So some of these you might build early on, some of them you might build later, or all of them you might build later. Manning these buildings can be quite costly, so there is a special building which allows you to consolidate, and that is the university building. By building a university building next to one of these, in this kind of formation, or in that formation if you choose to, by just manning the university, you gain the benefit of all of the buildings around. That can prove to be quite lethal later in the game if you decide to build all of these in a city and have a university. Sometimes this can be a lifesaver. In the game, buildings are limited, with the exception of a few: fishermen, storage, carts, and fountains. And of course you have your inns and your houses, but that's a given. Any other building, you can only build once. So, no skimping by with 2 hospitals, or 2 dumps. Or 2 of anything else. Here is what a 2-player game would look like at setup. You have 2 tiles per player randomly chosen, with one starting city in this area and another starting city in this area. we would take the player's pieces, mix them up, and draw one, and yellow would be the starting player. Yellow has the choice of which side to put a starting city, here or here. Now, the rule for placing your starting city is that it just must all be within that first tile. It can't overlap another tile. So yellow decides to place it here and place her city right there. Now, there is a rule that you need to adhere to, and that is once you start building other cities, you will not be able to place them on top of water. Your starting city is the only time you can place a city on top of water. So this would be fine for your starting city. But later on in the game, if you want to build another city here, you would not be able to do that. So yellow decides to place a starting city here, and blue decides to place a starting city here. Now let's take a look at some basic things about the main board. Here we have a starting city placed on top of a mountain range. Now with this mountain range, as you can see, it is divided by this city. One mountain range can contain only one resource. So there are two resources to be found in mountains, gold and stone. So if I decide to go mining for stone in this mountain range over here, it's connected here, so all of this will be stone, no matter who goes mining for it. If somebody decides to go over here, whoever's first can decide which resource this mountain range produces. So you have to be careful that you all don't go for the same resource in a certain region and just have lackluster amount of the other type. There are, of course, the different terrain types. The grasslands, which will allow you to farm sheep, wine, wheat, and olives. The water, which you will be able to farm fish, dyes, and pearls. The forest, which will provide the wood to build almost anything in the game. And the mountains, which will allow you to get stone and or gold. There are 4 types of explorer tokens that are scattered throughout the main board. You will place them according to how many players there are in the game. For each player, you will place one type of each resource that is on the explorer token. For example, there are olives and sheep and wheat and wine. Notice that the olive, sheep, and wheat have a red arrow on them. That means when you find that particular token, the famine track will go up 1 spot. With wine, it won't, because wine is considered a luxury good. So finding those will give you the seeds or the initial one that you need to plant many farms of that. But the downside to that will be that you will increase the famine. And it doesn't just hurt you, it hurts everybody. So if you can protect yourself, then you're okay. Luckily enough, the food items, which will increase the famine, provide 1 food for you. So it's no change on your part, but for others, it will increase by 1. So I have to place some explorer tokens at the start of the game for these spots. They are randomly shuffled and put down. Now, if I decide to place a worker here, this explorer token will disappear without me getting access to it. So you have to be careful. If you really want to explore, you have to plan where your workers go initially. So even if I place a woodcutter here, this guy will disappear. But if I explore him first, then I can place a woodcutter here and gain access to all of that wood. Now, one of the most important things in the game to remember is to respect the wood. The wood is everything for you. If you run out of wood, you have nowhere else to go, unless you have a market. But even then, that can prove to be fatal. Please don't ever lose sight of your wood. Always have wood. Without wood, you are lost. So, it's the start of the game, and I don't know what to do. Well, let's take a look at some possible actions. When you begin the game, you get a starter city. Here is your city map. You also begin with 6 wood. The first phase, all rise, take man off of all city buildings. I don't have any city buildings, so I cannot do that. So that brings us to phase 2, city. Secretly build city improvements. Man city buildings. New men may be used immediately. Order can be chosen freely. Market may trade. Hospitals may clear 5 graves. And the theology building may raise own cathedral, except Santa Maria. Well, I don't have anything. I have access to 4 workers, 4 houses. And I want to build some buildings. Well, of course the cart is the most important. So I will build a cart that costs 1 wood. And I might as well build another cart. That cost me another wood. I don't want to get any famine in the game, so I might build a granary here, which will cost me another wood. I feel like I will go exploring, so I will pay 1 more wood to go exploring. I have built 4 buildings at a cost of 1 wood each. That's what their cost is. Well, I have my buildings, but I need houses so I can put workers in the field. So at the beginning of the game, you are allowed 4 houses for free. And I think I will do that. So I will put my first house here, my second house here, my third one here, and my 4th one. Placement is very important. Once you place something in your city, you cannot move the buildings around unless you build a cathedral dedicated to Santa Barbara. You can move your buildings around. But if you don't think you will, placement is very important. So now that I have the 4 houses, I will put 1 worker in this cart, 1 in this cart, and 1 in the explorer building. I have 1 left over. He's just going to sit out and relax. Take it easy. Do nothing. So I've spent 4 wood. They're gone. I have 2 wood left. Well, either I can use the wood, for example, the people in my cart, put them out in the field, or I can do nothing and the wood will disappear because I have no storage or way to put it in a storage. I have no wood left, but I will soon be able to gain access to wood on the main board. So yellow has gone, and now it's my turn, and I have 2 men in the carts. I can put them out in the field. So my first one, I will go get wood because that is very important. I can count off 1, 2, and that is in my zone of influence. If I put a woodcutter here, I would gain access to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wood. Or if I put him here, the same. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think I will put him there. Once you decide to put a woodcutter down, you must cover the woods with grassland. Once you chop down wood, it is gone forever. So, like I said, love the wood, celebrate the wood, treasure the wood. And I will place my woodcutter on the tile that extends around it. And so the woodcutter is put down, the grassland is put down, and I can put the resources down. Now, as you can see, there are 6 wood laid down, which tells you that it will take 6 rounds for you to gain access to all of that wood, unless you have the forced labor building. You will always take the wood around the woodcutter, and then you will take his wood last. Same with any other resource gatherer. The one that is underneath the worker is always taken last. Now, my second worker, I must decide where to go. Well, I would like to get stone. I will go here to get some stone. When you're getting stone, or any other farm or fish, pollution must be placed down first. The only time you don't put pollution down is when you get wood. And that's because you're changing the land from forest into grassland. So I pay my wood for my worker. He goes back to the supply, and my worker is going to gather stone. His starting tile will be here. There's a stone chit and 2 more stone. And that's that. So now we must store goods. I've used all of my wood, so I don't have to store any goods. If you have resources left over in your city or harvest box, they will disappear forever unless you have put them in the storage. This is a common mistake many players make when they don't store goods and they lose their goods before they get to harvest new goods. Make sure you pay attention to that. So now I get to harvest. I'm going to take this wood from here, and I'll take this stone from here, and they go into my harvest box. And since I have a manned explorer, I'm going to explore the land. Ooh, I want to build some more wood later on, so I'm going to explore this one. Turn it over, and it is wine. Wine is great because it's a luxury good. You need a farm, and it does not make the famine track go up. So I get a grape seed from the supply, and it's added to my harvest. So in a subsequent round, if I would like to build a fisherman, I would first put a worker in the cart, pay 1 wood to build Mr. Fisherman, and then I would have to place him within my zone of control and next to water. Even if there is pollution here, I can build a fisherman on top of that. What that means is, though, once the fisherman is done and he leaves, the pollution stays there. Since I don't have pollution there, though, I could build a fisherman here. But that would give me access to maybe 2 resources right there. That's not a good plan. So if I had the harbor, maybe in a later round, I could theoretically build a fisherman here or here, as long as he's in the zone of control and is next to water. If I build him here, then I can use 4 water tiles to go fishing or pearl diving or for dyes. Now is the famine check phase. At this point of the game, you would look at where the famine check marker is, and based on where it's at, you would put that amount of graves in your city, depending on if you have enough food to cover the shortage or not. Now remember, the granary does a deduction of 3 for putting graves in your city. So if you have an explorer token that you discovered and it has a red arrow on it, at that time the famine track would have gone up. Because it's the first round of the game, it has not gone up. So when we look at it, our cities do not get any graves, and both people have built a granary, so there are no graves in the city. At the end of the famine check, it goes up 1 automatically. It may not seem like a lot, but as the game progresses, it will continue to go up, making it harder and harder for you to survive. And when people explore, it goes up automatically. If you have enough food to cover the cost, then you don't have to add graves. If you don't, then you will have to place graves in your city, and you would first have to place them in empty spots. And then after that, you will have to start covering buildings. And once you start covering a building, it becomes useless. You cannot use that building unless you clear the graves off of it by using the hospital. You cannot put graves on houses. That's one of the rules. So you must put them in the available spots. The second to last thing is to do a pollution check. Each city produces 3 pollution. So I must take 3 pollution from the supply and add them around my city in my zone of control. Technically I cannot put it on water because it's not in my zone of control. But if my harbor was manned, then I could put the pollution on the water. I decide, well, I'll put pollution here, and here, and here. This area is filthy. And then you check for victory conditions. I haven't won. It's only the first round. Now, the rulebook, clear and concise as it may be, still presents a few problems. Well, every game does. Sometimes there's certain situations where there's no real known answer, and we must consult the community online to figure out what is the best course of action. Some of these rules can be explained easily right now. For example, when you build a storage building, it must be rectangular. It can be any size as long as it is rectangular, and it will cost 1 wood. Building a storage now and then a storage in a later round, they are 2 separate storage buildings and require men in each one. Another rule that people get confused with is the dump. If you have a man dump, people cannot pollute your zone of control. So, if you have a man dump and another player has a man dump, you cannot pollute each other's zone of control. If you cannot place pollution, then you must take graves. Another rule people get confused with is building. Building on resources. Well, you just can't. You can't put an inn on another resource. You can't put a city on resources. You can't put a woodcutter on other people's resources. You just can't. Now, pollution, that's a different story. You can build an inn over pollution. Same with a city. Same with a fishery. You just can't go looking for resources on already polluted tiles. If the grassland is already polluted and you want to look for olives or sheep, you just can't do that. You have to clean it and then you can build it. Grave placement. Well, throughout the game you will get graves. And where to place them? Well, they must always be placed on free spaces first. Then, if you cannot place them on a free space, they must be placed on buildings, not houses. Houses are special. That's where people live. You can't put graves on someone's house, but you can sneak a body into a cart or a hospital even, or even the alchemy building, which would be apropos. Just not on houses. I wouldn't recommend covering your hospital with graves because that is one of the only, that is the only way you can get rid of it. Avoid doing that at all costs. Well, that about does it for us. I hope you enjoyed our little brief look into my Grail game, one that I hold very near and dear to my heart. It's very easy to understand the rules in this game, very clear and concise. But if there are problems that do arise, you can easily reference the rulebook or the online community. This is not a game that has too many problems or is broken. It is very clean, crisp, and understandable. Now, with that in mind, it does not detour from the gameplay, which is quite difficult and strategic. It's almost like a themed chess with planning required. You must think about moves far and far in advance. The player interaction is a bit minimal, especially at the beginning. You are focusing on building your engine. Later in the game, you will, however, interact with others, whether it's to enter their zone of control or to put your pollution in their area. But for the most part, you are focused on your engine, which is a system that I tend to like. I love being able to micromanage and build up an engine. And this game has crisis management. There are moments where you will get graves on your buildings in your city, where pollution gets out of control. And if you're not careful, you will find yourself in just a pit of death and despair, which I have had happen to me quite often. But if you plan ahead, you keep your head down, you focus, you will be able to survive and possibly win the game. There's nothing more satisfying than being able to beat your opponent one round before they are going to win. It's quite a thrill. Well, thank you for joining us on Coffee and Board Games. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, I don't know until then.